So I have to be very careful when filming this video because there are genuinely lizards about. I'll try and show you if I can find a lizard. Well, I say lizard, they could be crocodiles for all I know. But as I do film this video, gentlemen, in a couple of days I will be 30 years young. And I have some notes here on 5 things that I wish I had known prior to, I suppose, entering even my 20s, because the 10 years before 20, they lack the patience that you think they will have, or at least I think I will have. Now, without wasting your time, guys, the first one is don't have sex with too many women. And the idea is that this creates multiple reference points in your mind to be dissatisfied with your current sexual partner, especially if they don't meet your sexual expectations as previous ones have. You may disqualify genuinely good, pure, noble, and God-fearing women because they are not as sexually experienced as others. And you can coach these women. I mean, you were terrible at sex the first time that you did it. Sorry to burst the illusion, but you get better as time goes on. And I hate this idea that you need to have multiple sexual partners to be, what would you say, proficient in sex. But you can be proficient with the same person. It doesn't mean you need to have different partners. In fact, I think there's a element of, what would you say, challenge and nuance involved with continuing to grow and evolve your sexual relationship and intimacy with your current partner. And do know that this is all dependent on what you want, of course. If you want monogamy, then practice for monogamy, which would mean having as few long-term relationships as possible. If you want promiscuity and infidelity, then practice as many short-term relationships as possible. So you're practicing for either one. Don't get upset that you couldn't make the football team because you've been practicing basketball. They're not the same thing. They're really not. Anyway, the second realization I hope you make faster than I do is dropping the holier than thou attitude. And this is something that I still need to work on. There are many steps that both you and I have taken along the path to realize God in ourselves, but that is not to say that we are in many ways still infants at school. We're still children, and this is the playground, so to speak. You don't get to that pinnacle of yoga or God realization or self-realization by not playing the game and meditating in a Himalayan cave. And that's actually the fundamental difference between Hinduism and Buddhism, at least in my estimation. So just to kind of give you a definition for that, the distinction between the two. Buddhism is a branch of Hinduism, and I know a lot of people will argue that particular point, that Gautama, I forget his name, but the Buddha was a Hindu. Now, the way Buddhism is different from Hinduism is in the path to realization, and Buddhism is really, it attempts to reduce karmic debt through inaction, by asceticism, by meditation, by fasting, by renouncing the world, by meditating in that cave that I mentioned before. Now, God does tell Arjuna that you can realize himself through Buddhism, but it takes longer. It takes far longer than it would through, let's say, a branch of Hinduism, which is the perspective that you're here on earth, you're here in this Maya, in this matrix. Play the game. Don't avoid the game, play the game. And you will reduce your karmic debt sooner by practicing spiritual action. That's another way to think of it. Take more risks, make mistakes, throw yourself into the current of the world and allow yourself to be immersed in the unexpected. There is great fear to overcome in this, but the fruits are of equal greatness. The evolution is plentiful and God comes ever closer. The third is to leave home for at least a year. Now, environment serves as a form of powerful conditioning, my friends. If you make it to 30 without having consciously exposed yourself to a new location, a new environment for a significant period of time, there is an opinion I have to share with you, and that opinion is that largely the person you are now is not by your own designs, but it's by external designs, it's by other people's designs. And you're just a passenger in a vehicle, watching through the windows as life passes you by. Now, I realized I was the victim of this by the time I was 21, that my friends and family and hometown was never influenced by personal choice, rather proximity. Proximity. I swear this humidity is getting to me. Many people will say that you can't choose these things, but I disagree in respects to how long you can allow yourself to be potentially poisoned by these things. You know, you can't choose your family, but you can choose how long you allow yourself to be influenced by them. Are you consciously studying your parents, your mother, your father, and how they shape your world views and beliefs? Something to meditate on. Well, you're not changing, you're choosing. It's another way to think about it. Every decision you make is a vote for the person that you want to become, be it hanging out with the same degenerate friends for sake of social comfort, let's say, or staying in the same job for the sake of financial security. It all comes under the same rubric of comfort. Comfort is a killer. There is something unique that happens to you the first time that you fly the nest and you set up in a new location, and only those who have done this before will experience, or let's say agree with what I just saw a lizard. Hold on. See if I can turn this around. Don't know if you can see him. He looks really big to me, but he's down there. Anyway, speaking of discomfort, so I was going to say there was something very unique that happens to you the first time that you fly the nest that only people who have done this will appreciate, which is a overwhelming feeling of optimism, an overwhelming feeling of possibility, that your character isn't muddied by the previous marketing of where you live, which leaves you so much space and opportunity to create a new character, because there's no worry or anxiety that you're going to run into people who previously knew you and you have to conform to an old model of yourself because it's incongruent with who you were. That's the way to look at it. This lizard is getting mighty close and I might have to scarp her. So when I chose to move from Greater London to the South Coast, I started meeting new people, and you are blessed with this notion of a blank sheet, so to speak. You can introduce yourself to, however you want. You can embellish, you can exaggerate. And I think the important thing to maybe note here is that you're not being incongruent, rather you're giving yourself the opportunity to strengthen elements of your personality that were previously weak. So don't think of it as you're living a falsehood or you're pretending to be somebody else. Rather, you're giving different branches of your personality to grow in a way that was never allowed to by your previous environment because it was too suffocating. I even remember introducing myself with my full name when I was down at the South Coast. Everybody at home in Greater London knew me as Joe, but when I went south I started introducing myself as Joseph. And it might sound very trivial, but it's highly significant because it's the first kind of piece of information that you share with somebody. There's associations in my mind of maybe Joe not being quite consistent with the character that I want to embody, but Joseph is far closer. He's far more eloquent, confident, articulate. So yeah, you're not being disingenuous, you're just allowing parts of your personality that didn't get the water or the nutrients to grow. Look, for example, I've always been more of an introverted character, which is not the same thing as saying that I'm shy or non-social. It just means that you gain energy in isolation, where the opposite is true for extroverts. So again, if I'm inside by myself, I recharge, but if I'm with other people, I find them very, very draining sometimes. Extroverts is the opposite. Now, while at university, I decided to stop branding myself as an introvert, but rather somebody that can move and instigate social situations, who got the ball rolling, who made plans, who invited people, and that's again, part of a personality that I was allowed to develop. Anyway, fourth one is buy income, not debt. This is a really interesting one, which is the idea that when I first got my salary job, I nearly bought a Mercedes A-Class on finance, or renting. That's another way to think about it. That would have been the worst decision I would have ever made, because that would have been a huge liability. That would have been a purchase of debt. When you're young, you certainly don't want to be doing this if you want to be wealthy. The poor buy debt, which makes them appear to look wealthy. And the wealthy, they do the opposite. They acquire assets that accrue value over time. And I'm going to give some examples in just a moment, but it's really interesting, again, how the poor, they actually secretly, or let's say the poor mindset, they secretly despise the wealth or the wealthy, and that's why they'll never acquire it. And instead they placate to this idea of marketing themselves as such, and in that way they will never truly realize the mentality that it takes in order to be wealthy. Instead, buy income. Base your financial choices on purchases that perception believes will accrue in value. Now, I'm very particular with the way that I say that. I'm going to say it one more time. Base your financial choices on purchases that perception believes will accrue in value. So here's an idea. I don't invest in crypto because this coin is hot, or this meme coin is going to take off, or this blockchain, or this tip. I don't do that. I invest in crypto because of the premise in which it precedes itself, which is essentially this: a decentralized currency, a currency that is free from the bureaucracy of the banks and the governments. Now, if you have to ask why that is valuable, if you haven't guessed already, it's tyranny. It's tyranny. There are some banks that will close down your account if they find out you're a particular political ideology. Can you imagine that? I mean, we can even talk about Canada, can't we? When I believe it was the farmers were driving their tractors up to the capital, and Trudeau froze all their accounts. How, like, that is the definition of tyranny. So it's you're placing value where the perception of value believes it's equally going to accrue over time, which is the idea that we want to live in a world that is free from tyranny, and that's what you're voting for. That's what you're buying, and that's what everybody else wants. And I'll leave you with the last one, because I've been ranting for a little bit here in this beautiful location. The world is very stimulating. It can be effectively navigated with equal practices of non-stimulation. Another way of saying this now is a lot of the world promotes beta brainwave behavior, and there's no escaping the screens. Your only hope to surf the modern wave is to do so with some kind of practices that promote alpha brainwave patterns. Meditation, breathwork, Qigong. I'm going to do some breathwork in this lovely park, I think, in a moment. I would even go as far as to say that these kind of practices are mandatory now. I mean, even if you want to protect a modicum of your mental health, your mental attention. As fast-paced as the world is, I think there's a lot of power in quoting very simple aphorisms like, if you don't discipline yourself, best believe the world will do it for you. Choose your pain. So you can choose the pain of being socially inept, of being distracted, of being this bumbling buffoon, or you can choose the pain, or I wouldn't even call it pain, discomfort of sitting with your thoughts for 30 minutes every single day. So that's your choice. Yeah, choose whichever one is most fitting for you. I know which one I'm gonna choose. So it's got to be 30 minutes a day. I know a lot of people will pick up on that. It's very specific because I don't really truly believe you can get into deep meditation until at least 20 minutes, and then the 10 minutes after your mind, or 20 minutes after your mind calms down, that 10 minutes is kind of when you're really getting into that deep state. Or, you could do 20 minutes of meditation and breath work, so 10 minutes of hard breath work and 10 minutes of meditation. The breath work gets you there so quickly. When you're getting so much oxygen into your body and alkalizing the blood and electrifying the nervous system, your brain is moving from that fast wave beta to the slow deep alpha. And then The silence is incredibly loud, incredibly loud. And as always, everything that I'm describing is achievable in a very short amount of time through the breathworks that I have in the Patreon, which will be in the description below. $5 and you get access to the entire library that will tangibly change your brain chemistry. And those are not theories, those are facts. Speak soon, breathe soon. Happy birthday to me. And let's hope I have another 10 years. So I don't think I'm done yet.